We delivered. Now it's time for all of you to respond. Welcome in, everyone, to the Voice of College Football. It's a Sunday night in late May. Welcome to Memorial Day weekend, Voice of College Football. Hope you're enjoying your holiday weekend. And of course, tomorrow, Monday, is the day to officially celebrate Memorial Day and those who have passed on due to military service. So our thoughts and prayers go out to those families that have suffered a loss. And thank you so much for your service. 2023 program rankings. We will discuss with all of you. Please call the show. We've left the link in the description section, we have left the link in the live chat a number of times. So pick it up right there. We have left it on Twitter as well. So follow me on Twitter at MarkRogersTV. And of course, we want to respond to you. We're going to run through many of the comments that have come in concerning our program rankings. So hopefully you're prepped. I'm not going to run through all the rankings. That's why the videos are there. So we produce the videos. We work in producing the videos. We research. We actually deliver some effort on the videos. So please check out the videos. I'm not going to recant the rankings. They're on the channel already. So your comments, your questions, your criticisms are all fair game. They are not perfect rankings. Again, they can be debated. Of course, there is no way that anyone can determine program or team rankings, whether those be in the moment or all time, and defend it that this team or this particular program has to be number 7. They can't be number 6. They can't be number 9. They can't be number 11. They have to be number 7. That's a ridiculous point of view. So, of course, they can be debated. And that's why we are here with all of you. So we appreciate you all being here. This is going to be a good time running through the program rankings. So before I take any calls, which I will hear in just a second, as we've got a few callers on the line already, so thank you for that, is that I want to review, because it's obvious to many what the rankings are. So I appreciate every time we do rankings, or anytime I deliver opinion on here, I appreciate those who are locked in on the criteria, because the criteria is just about everything. You need to understand the criteria. So when I get 20 or 30 comments from people that obviously don't understand the criteria, I got to say my initial response is to kind of fly off the handle and put them in their place. Then I think, over 3,000 people watch this video. If 20 or 30 people don't get it, which I'm guessing a few more people than that don't get it, that's fine. That's understandable. I understand they're long video, 25, 30 minutes, but we wanted to be detailed. We wanted to be comprehensive. And when you talk for 1 to 2 minutes on each team and you cover 25 teams, you're going to have a 30 or 35-minute video. So thank you so much for watching the videos. We appreciate that. And again, before we get to the calls, I want to make sure that everybody understands what we are ranking here, because not everyone does. These are not all-time rankings. So that's first and foremost. This is a ranking right now. Right now. Of course, what happened in the past does have a great impact on what happens today. We can't visit 133 schools on campus that are not playing football right now and determine how they would rank right this very second. Of course, much of it's based on what happened in 2022. Of course, that is the best barometer of where the programs stand right now. It is the best barometer. What happened on the field in 2022 is the best barometer for where the programs stand, but that's not even close to the only barometer. Case in point, who thinks that Illinois is a better football program than Texas A&M? Texas A&M versus Illinois. Illinois clearly had a better football team this past football season, but a better football program. So there is a difference between the program and the team. This is neither an all-time ranking. This is an in-the-moment 2022 going into 2023. There is a transition. We're in the off season. So we very much look at the 2022 results and the 2022 team, and then the additions and subtractions and then how that projects to 2023. But this is not a team ranking. We will deliver our predictions for 2023. Somebody commented to us, and I think it was one of our faithful viewers. I don't want to say exactly who because I don't remember who made the statement today. We'll have to wait and see how these predictions come out. They're not predictions. These are not predictions. They're not all-time rankings. They're not predictions. They're not even team rankings for 2022 or 2023. They're partially team rankings, but you take the team in 2022. You take the recruiting classes, you take the additions, you take the subtractions through the NFL draft and otherwise. You project toward 2023, but it's not even that. It has so much to do with the head coach. And of course, if a head coach is Nick Saban or Dabo Swinney, and I'm not just speaking to their ability or their resume or their legacy, I'm also speaking just to their length of tenure. That program is very much at Alabama, Nick Saban. Clemson is very much Dabo Swinney. Kansas is less of Lance Leipold's program than those two previous programs I just mentioned. He's doing a fine job, but that's not, he and the program are not completely synonymous at this point. He's only been there for 2 seasons. So the head coach is a huge factor in this, but it's a bigger factor with certain programs than others. This is a nuanced ranking. It's not 5% coach, 8% this, 12% that. It depends on how important that component is to that particular program. It is much more important that Dabo Swinney is the head coach at Clemson than Justin Wilcox is the head coach at Cal, even though he's been there for a long time. And certainly it's more important that Dabo Swinney is the head coach at Clemson than Troy Taylor is the head coach at Stanford. So I'm not going to say each one is a 30% component of this ranking because it's not. It depends on the program, facilities, resources, recruiting, brand, popularity, conference affiliation. I looked at like programs and I saw some of these programs located in the ACC and the Pac-12 and said, you know what? Your counterpart in the Big Ten, they're in the Big Ten. Their program is much more valuable because they are earning more money just on a television contract, let alone all the other benefits of being in that conference, but just on a television contract before 2024. And then 2024, when the new contract kicks in, makes that program even more valuable. I could have in some ways made it very easy on myself to say, you know what? All the SEC and all the Big Ten programs are ahead of all the other programs. But that would not be nuanced, and that would not be completely accurate, at least in my view. All right, let's go to the calls. And again, it's a 1 through 133 program ranking, not an all-time ranking, not a team ranking, not a roster ranking for 2023. Right here at the Voice of College Football. Use the Amazon link. Please do that. It's very easy to do. I've tested this out with a dozen different friends to say the Amazon link, this is easy, right? Yep, it's easy. I use it just like I used to use my own link. Just use the Amazon link. It's in the description section of the videos. You will help us build and grow the channel. We would like to be doing this at this time next year, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. I've got my dream job. Help me keep it alive. Let's do that. But it also benefits you if you love the content and if you love the discussion, the debate, and the analysis. And we always love hearing from Mr. David Greenshield. David, how are you doing tonight?
A pleasure, Mark. I just got a chance to review the top 10 and look it over. I found it to be quite interesting. I want to start with a quick question. Since I just saw the top 10, was Tennessee 11, 12? Where did you have Tennessee?
Tennessee's 15.
Oh, they were 15. Okay. Interesting. I find that, because I think your 11 or your 12 was what, Florida State?
11, Florida State, 12, Utah somewhere there, Oregon somewhere there. I will have to pull it up.
Okay. All
I
right.
don't remember exactly.
All right. So I find it interesting because first of all, I thought you might have had Tennessee a little bit higher. Was that kind of a close call, for you? Just kind of you look at having the season that they had, maybe trajectory of the program going forward.
Well,
You seem
most
to
of
be
them are close calls.
yeah,
So that's another part of this. For nobody that's ever done the exercise themselves, they have to understand whether you're talking coaches rankings, team rankings, program rankings, just because somebody's 11 and somebody's 16 doesn't mean that there's much difference between the two.
that's true. No, I hear you. You as you get to like a lot of these teams, towards the end of the top 10 into to about 15, there's not a huge chasm of difference. I get your point. I do want to start out with the top 10. I found Oklahoma at 10. I'll make a comment on that. Really interesting. Isn't it interesting that just a matter of a few years ago, Oklahoma was probably in Mark Rogers' top 4 or 5?
Maybe not quite that high, but
Well,
close to
two,
it. Yeah.
2019, let's say, 4 years ago.
They weren't quite that high for me, just because
Okay,
I didn't take the college football playoff appearances to be
really?
what they would be in another conference, and that's because of the program not being quite that good. Look at the
S-
results in the college football playoff. I think the results, and not just because they showed up and they got blown out in playoff games. That's happened to Ohio State. That's
Sure.
happened to Alabama in a
Happened to
championship game.
Clemson. Yeah,
It happened to Clemson, but repeatedly, and also that to me being a strong indicator as to them being further behind the elites. And I thought that those playoff scores were very indicative of where they stood, that they weren't that close.
well, they perpetually got worse. They lost the heartbreaker with the Baker Mayfield team, and then the Kyler Murray game was a little bit closer against Alabama, and then obviously it was a total whitewashing against LSU. So it was like it, progressively got worse for them over the course of 3 playoffs. But I thought after having 3 playoffs in a row, I thought after 2019, I'm most surprised you didn't have them in the top 5 or 4 programs at that
Well,
time.
yeah, if this was 2019, if we were
Yeah,
sitting right here after the 2019 season,
yeah,
3 years ago, after the
yeah,
2019 season, LSU's higher, Ohio State's higher,
yep,
Clemson's higher easily, Alabama's higher.
sure, yep.
So those four are higher without a doubt. I guess I would have had, I don't know how long I've been doing this. I'd have to go back. I guess Oklahoma might be at number 5 at that point.
Yeah, I'm just kind of getting to the overall theme of just, yeah, I mean, just what you just said, how quickly the narrative can change just in a matter of a couple of years. Um, and I'm going to get to something about maybe one play maybe changing things here in a little bit when I talk about my team, and you think where I may be going with that. But what I what I did find interesting though is Texas at 9. That was the one that really kind of I mean, they had an okay season this year, Mark. Is that just how much of this also did you weigh just the trajectory of these programs going forward? Was that also, hey, I could see this program contending and being a playoff team possibly or playoff contender down the road?
Okay, so Texas traditionally is a blue blood of top 5 status, roughly top 5 status. They have remarkable resources. They recruit in the top 5. They earned more revenue than any football program in the country outside of Ohio State last year.
Mhm.
Yes, they're disappointing on the field, but I think the other things justify the ranking.
Really? I mean, I don't know. I got to see a little bit more food on my plate there, you know. And no, go ahead.
So Tennessee, so you thought I may have had Tennessee at 11.
Yeah, I
And,
thought maybe 11 or 12.
and so Tennessee having done what they did one time, one season with a horrible defense, with a pretty bad defense.
Okay.
and with a quarterback who's moving on, who had much to do with that. So it's a very. I'm not saying that they won't sustain it. I'm not saying that Josh Heupel's not good. I think to get a full take on my rankings, you have to listen to what I have to say as well. So,
Sure. Well,
I explain all these things. So
well,
just because
let
Tennessee, like I'm a bit questioned on programs that do it one time.
I hear you. What I would also say would be interesting to look at both programs' trajectory going forward. And when we spoke about Tennessee before, remember we had a little discussion about them when we were talking about the Big Ten last week, and saying, are they going to be the fourth best team in the SEC this year after the top three? And you thought possibly, and I said, well, they have a lot of talent going out the door. First of all, also, I don't know if I'm necessarily bullish on Texas's prospects going forward, having, going to have to join the SEC, even with the resources, the dollars they have, and the recruiting base they have. And I'm not trying to jump on a bandwagon here, but there's a lot of people that say enjoy being 6-6, 7-5 at best there, Sark, because once you get to the SEC, if you can't be winning 10 games, in the Big 12, how are you going to get to 10-2, even 9-3 in the SEC?
Well, there's a few things there. Number one would be, yes, if Texas does not improve, they're going to get their lunch handed to them in the SEC. If
Yeah.
they perform the same, they're going to take a couple more losses. I'm also not going to continue to rank these teams or these programs. I want to make that distinction. Programs, it's not a
Mm-hmm.
team ranking, it's a program ranking, at least at this juncture, just based on their record. So if I believe Texas has just as good a program and they're losing more games in the SEC, I'm still going to rank them appropriately.
Okay. Yeah, I mean,
And that's a tough call to make as well, but I will.
yeah, I mean, are we just saying that, okay, you're in the SEC, 7-5 is, different. It's going to be a lot different, obviously, than, and I hear you, going 10-2 somewhere else or 11-1 somewhere else.
Well, that's
I
a
mean, I get
pretty
your point.
drastic comparison, 11-1 and 7-5. But yes, I'm not lining up records and just saying, well, the 8-4 program is better than the 7-5 program automatically.
Well, yeah, the interesting thing was going to be, though, the obvious thing is the obvious thing. I mean, this is a program that's won, how many Big 12 titles in the last 5 to 10 years and now they're going to go ahead and join the best conference in college football. And it's going to be, as folks going to say, good luck, Sark.
Well, he's not going to be around long if he's not performing. So it's not going to be good luck, Sark. It's going to be, we're moving on to the next guy. He's either going to deliver or he's not going to be there.
Better chance to keep their job in the next 5 years. Sarkisian at Texas or Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M?
I knew you were going to throw out
Yeah.
Jimbo.
Come on now.
Sark.
Okay. So if we look back in 5 years, you'd be not as surprised that Sark still has his job as compared to. I think it's do or die for Jimbo. So I actually probably tend to agree with you.
Yeah, that's where I'm headed. Is
Yeah.
Jimbo's going into season 6?
Yeah. Living off of one good COVID year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Otherwise, he's performing most of these seasons. The last year was bad,
Mm-hmm.
but the rest of the time he's been Missouri.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty high level Missouri, but whatever. Michigan State.
Agree with you, by the way, about 8 and 7. Penn State and then USC at 7. Interesting to see. Penn State, things are going to change for them, but I think Riley's the right guy, and I think he's going to have that program strong for years to come. It will be interesting to see once they join the Big Ten and how that game plays. Although he's in an interesting spot. Some have compared him to Ryan Day from the standpoint where both great offensive minds, both great quarterback whisperers, developers of quarterbacks, but Can they get their defense right? Is the question, probably for both, right?
Well, more so from Lincoln Riley's standpoint. You comparing Lincoln Riley and James Franklin
No, I
on the
was saying,
defensive side of the ball?
no, I made the Day Riley comparison. You know how both are great
Yes.
offensive minds, both are great developers of quarterbacks, but both have to, make sure that they get the defensive, side right. Obviously he's got Grinch, and obviously with Day he's got a lot invested with Knowles. So, offensive minded coaches, you better get that defensive coordinator right.
Yeah, and I've got much more confidence in Jim Knowles than I do Alex Grinch.
Yeah. And people say I'm biased on that one. I have a little bit more confidence in Knowles. Although I know that actually Grinch coached at Ohio State that 2018 defense, and I think that was more on Schiano, though, to be fair, than it was on Grinch.
And Alex Grinch did a nice job at Washington State.
Yeah, he
He
didn't
did
do
a
a bad
really nice
job.
job there.
Yeah. And Oklahoma, like that first year, I think he went to Oklahoma. Didn't they improve a little bit categorically defensively?
Oh, yeah.
Well, they had nowhere to go up, but after 18, the 18 defense was like 100 and something, that Kyler Murray Oklahoma defense.
Yeah, he
Daycare.
raised them 35 or 40 spots.
Right. Yeah, they're a program I think whose trajectory is up. This is going to be an interesting year, with Caleb Williams one more year. So, want to get to the top six. LSU. You know what I find to be interesting, and I want to get to this too, because by the way, are you going to bring back? Is SEC's show still going on Tuesdays, or
We
where you
put
at
it
with
to
that?
rest.
Oh, really?
There wasn't a whole lot of reason to do it.
Okay.
It just, I can only schedule so many shows. And
I
so
get it.
they need to have some kind of response to them at a certain level. So,
Well, the thing about it is, and I know we're probably both accused a lot on numerous occasions of being Big Ten people. Mark, I'm sure you've probably heard that before. But from my perspective, I do follow the SEC. I don't follow it as closely as the Big Ten because my favorite team plays in the Big Ten for obvious reasons. But I watch it. I watch a ton of SEC games. Usually I would. It used to be I would watch the Big Ten early, and then I'd watch the SEC at like 3:30. So, but with scheduling now, that's all these games are kind of scattershot all over the place. But to the LSU part of it, you've got LSU at 6. What I find to be, and by the way, did you do a list of ranking the biggest games already of 2023, Mark?
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Where is
Out of conference games.
out of conference? You
Yeah.
haven't ranked your biggest in conference games yet.
No.
Okay. Because after the game, I think Alabama LSU has got to be right up there as far as conference games this year.
Yeah, I can't say that full throttle with conviction because there are just so many opportunities for other games in the SEC to be as important. But yeah, it's up there. Clemson and Florida State's a huge game.
Agreed. That'd be my top 4 or 5. Yep.
And if you believe in somebody being a college football playoff contender in the Pac-12, probably USC, then they have a number of games as well.
Agreed. But what I find to be interesting about that Alabama LSU dynamic, and this has interesting program rankings. You've got LSU at 6 in your rankings. You've got Alabama at 2. I think deserve it for both. Is what if LSU this year does it 2 years in a row, and they do it in Tuscaloosa? What? I'm not buying the Nick Saban, and I'm not one of those, and I'm not certainly one to defend Alabama, but I'm not one of those buying that Nick Saban is losing it and that the dynasty is over and Alabama is at the end. But if LSU does it 2 years in a row and goes into Tuscaloosa and does it this year, interesting.
Let's look back upon history and understand that while there will be an end to Nick Saban's run at Alabama, I don't know if he's going to be 76 or he's going to be 87 or he's going to be 92, whatever it is,
Right.
there will be an end to it at some point. And unless he wins a championship and then says, hey, this is a good time, this is a sweet spot, I'm going off onto the sunset, off a seventh or whatever the number is, eighth national championship, more than likely it's going to end for him similar to the way it ends for everyone, that he is going to have a decline. Now, his decline could be 10-2, 10-2, 9-3 his last 3 seasons, and then that's it. And for him, that's serious decline, finishing with playoff teams that
Right.
lose in the first or second round of the playoffs and
Mhm.
finish in the top 10 in the country at number 9, 10, and 9 or something like that.
Right.
But let's also understand that, we live in a world where people jump to conclusions, people jump to overreactions, and we can point to a lot of times during Nick Saban's career when he's lost like one game, one key game, a championship game, didn't get to the championship that year, where people just suddenly write him off. I'm not one for sure. He had a 2013-14 back-to-back seasons where
Mhm.
they did not reach expectations, even though they were that close, just like they were that close last year. And then they
Right.
came back with a vengeance.
2 games on the last play. They lost 2 games on the last play last year. I mean, have you heard this too? I mean, his demise has been greatly exaggerated for years. Although, Alabama doesn't win a national title in 2 years, there's an uproar, right? I mean, how crazy is that, I just find that to be insane. But
It is insane.
listen, I was told if you're beaten by somebody in your division 2 years in a row, that means something.
Well, it means something, yes. And I'm guessing we'll get to that. But
Yes.
it means something if it also determines a championship.
That's true. That's true. There is the number one program on the other side of the SEC that still has to be slayed if either one of those teams gets to Atlanta.
And what I'm saying, and I'm saying this for everyone's benefit, not you get it, that circa 1996, is Michigan a better program than Ohio State because they won the last 2 times that they met on the field? No, because Ohio State was winning championships and Ohio State was the best program in the conference and had far better records. They just lost on a particular Saturday.
Right. Well, yes, those team up north teams weren't playing for really much in 95 and 96.
No.
They that was that period of time where they, had the 8-4 football teams. Okay, let's get to it. I mean, I understand you ranking them number 3, and I get that. I think that's the right decision. But I do have to ask, bottom line, if the fourth quarter goes differently down in the Georgia Dome, or if that kick goes in and Ohio State wins the national title, interesting how these rankings would look, right, Mark?
That's why you have to watch the video, because I told everyone how they would rank, what the rankings would be if that kick would have been good.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I'll leave that as the subplot for anyone. So if Ohio State makes a 50-yard field goal, and
right.
then what we assume would have happened in the national championship game would have happened,
Yes.
to whatever degree, 28-27, or I'm thinking more like 48-34, 48-31.
Yeah,
then
somewhere in that neighborhood.
My final rankings would have been drastically different. Drastically.
Yeah. It's interesting how one quarter, one kick, Yeah, it was interesting. We did the LSU Clemson game, kind of reviewing that game and thinking about, that year and losing in heartbreak. But, well, you have to face Joe Burrow and LSU next. This year, it's TCU. So if one play goes differently. So, yeah. No, I get it. Ohio State has to right the wrong this year, and that's what it's about. I totally get it. By the way, that was an interesting conversation you had with Mr. Dace, by the way, about that. By the way, how both fan bases would have to live, considering they would have beaten us, but if we would have won the national title, By the way, for historical purposes, you did a video on it, 1996. It almost happened.
Yes,
that year, and a case could be made that they maybe should have at least gotten a share that year.
Well, I think if you're being fair, if you're not making judgments on how good the teams are, if you're simply saying, let's honor resumes, then in my eyes, there should be a three-way split for the national championship.
You're talking 96 that year.
Yes.
Yeah. I doubt John Cooper ever got his flowers from Steve Spurrier, because that Sugar Bowl might not have mattered that night had Arizona State won that game.
No, not if the number 1 team in the country wins the Rose Bowl against the number 4 team in the country.
Right. Yeah.
Although the Florida game was convincing, the Florida win over Florida State, so I'm sure they would have had some support as a team that avenged their loss in an emphatic way.
By the way, Spurrier also should have sent flowers to John Makovic that year. Is also really who he should have sent the flowers to.
John Makovic at Texas?
Yeah, because remember
he knocked out Nebraska.
Yes. That was the first Big 12 title game. Because Nebraska could have played for the national title essentially 4 years in a row or something like that.
John Makovic and James Brown.
Yep. They had a pretty good backfield that year. Priest Holmes and Ricky Williams in the same backfield.
Yes.
It's pretty good.
Although Penn State took care of them in the Fiesta Bowl.
Yeah, they slapped them around pretty good.
38-15.
Yeah. John Makovic's tenure, not as good at Texas as it was at Illinois.
No.
Slightly better.
But that was a big year and a big conference championship upset. Yeah, I think that I have to honor the results when it comes to Ohio State and Michigan.
I get it.
And if
I get it.
Michigan was coming off, if Michigan was, from a record standpoint, if they were Maryland prior to 2021, and then they came out of nowhere, then I would give it more thought.
Yeah.
But they've been an established, really good top 10 to 15 program with Harbaugh prior to 2 seasons ago.
Yeah.
Now, I almost ranked Ohio State at 3 and Michigan at 4, and I would have been up here arguing and I would have had a very difficult argument, but I still could have made the argument, but it would have been more nuanced and less just, this one's easy.
No, I get it. They've won the head-to-head twice. They've won the conference twice. I can't make an argument against it. Your point being, if it was the 90s and it was 8-4 football teams or 8, you know what I mean? Something like that, beating undefeated teams, that'd be another thing altogether,
But
totally
I will
agree with
let
you on that.
Ohio State and Michigan fans both know, because whether they like it or not, that 3 versus 4 to me isn't like a large distinction. Like, I almost ranked Ohio State number 3. I came extreme, and that's not my bias coming through. That's saying, no, this program has been markedly better for years and years and years. Yes, they had a bad game in Ann Arbor, which it counts. It's meaningful. It's the most meaningful game of the entire season. And they had a bad fourth quarter and a half in Columbus. Again, it's extremely meaningful. I'm not discounting it, but everything else that's happening between those two programs still causes me to think that Ohio State's a better program. They're still recruiting better. I don't care what the rankings are this second, because if you look at the average player ranking, Ohio State's still bringing in better athletes than Michigan is.
Right. And if you took a sample size over the last 4 or 5 years too, on where the recruiting rankings, because
Oh, yeah.
remember your roster is comprised of how you're recruited really over a 3 year window, because those are the players that are going to be playing for you.
If I made this ranking very formulaic and let's say weighted the last season the most, and
Hmm.
then the 21 season like 80% of that, and then had some kind of formulaic approach, Ohio State would win the formula comparison.
Yeah, I mean, I get where you're going for that, but yeah, and I want to stipulate we got a lot of is it your largest fan base now, Mark? Did they is it flipped now? I don't want to.
Well,
We
I got to tell you,
don't want to
David, since
upset
I'm since
them.
I'm
So
keeping this, and I do appreciate the hundreds of people that have responded to
yes,
the count here, because I've been, let that go for like a year. I was counting for a long time, and then I let it go, and then I put out the all call the other day, and had tons of people. I think Michigan's got like a 75-60 lead.
okay, all right. I'm gonna have to do some recruiting. I'm gonna have to get
Yes,
out
do
there in
some
the field.
Actually,
Get,
everyone needs to do recruiting. I don't care who you root for. You need to
yes,
do recruiting.
we need to recruit. We need to hit up the fan base here and start bringing them in. But yeah, TTUN fans, don't get into an uproar. I agree with Mark's rankings, so I see where he's coming from. But it will be rectified this November. It is our goal to win and to get Steve Dace back to an Iowa movie theater. So if we can win and then start a streak again where we can get him back to an Iowa movie theater, then I think that's my goal here moving forward.
Well, we want to get him to a confidence level in which we get him out of the theater. He's missed the last two games at the theater.
Yeah. Well, now he's back watching the game again. In the 90s, when, Biaka Batuka was, beating us up, I wasn't at the movie theater
No,
watching Casino or
I don't.
something.
I don't
I
get that.
was,
I
what's
can't
up?
relate to that in any way.
Yeah. When
Take
Desmond
any
Howard,
hopeless situation of any of my teams, the Indians, the Buckeyes, through the years, the most hopeless situation. I remember going to, and now this is not championship caliber type stuff here, but it's still, if you're a Buckeyes fan or you're loyal to your college football team or your sports team, you'll relate to it. I remember going to a party the night of the Ohio State Minnesota game where the Buckeyes came back from 31-0 down to win. And I had a group of buddies who were laughing at me when I walked in the door because they were laughing at me. Ohio State got blown out today. Oh, they're laughing at me. I said, what are you talking about?
Greg
Oh,
Fry,
they
I
got
love
blown
that
out.
visor.
No, they didn't get blown out. What? I said, you don't turn the game off. You don't turn the game off.
That's right. Well, that's why you're the man that gives college football its voice.
Well, thank you, David. It also reminds me of sitting in the in Cleveland Municipal Stadium for a doubleheader against the Oakland A's, and it was the second game of the doubleheader. Greg Swindell pitched game number one, and the Indians were a horrible team. And this is when the Bash brothers were in full swing. This was either 89 or 90.
Yeah.
And so Swindell pitched a really good game, but lost like 2-1 the first game. But the second game, the Indians threw some stiff out there, like, Sergio Valdez or somebody in game number two.
Wow.
And it was like 15-1 in the ninth inning. And it was a not a packed house, because what the deal is, 73,000.
Oh, sure.
It was a good like 60-some thousand people at this doubleheader. My buddy and I, we don't leave. We're there in the eighth or ninth inning. It's 15-1. It's the second game of a doubleheader.
Yeah, don't get me started on 80s Indians references. I'll start talking Tom Candiotti and Pat Tabler and Brooke Jacoby. I remember those teams.
Yes, people think I love college football. I could talk about the 80s Indians all night, all day, all night.
That's when I was a little kid. I still have the Sports Illustrated. You still have that Sports Illustrated, don't you, Mark? Laying around there somewhere.
I got to say, up until about 2 years ago, I kept every Sports Illustrated I ever had back to 1979, but they're all pitched them all.
Mm-hmm.
But so it's long gone. But yes, Corey Snyder and Joe Carter on the cover.
Yes. Classic.
I used to keep a log, David, where I would write the score of every Indians game and the winning and losing pitchers and the attendance of the game and the date, and I would keep a log.
Wow. Where is that log?
I was anal about those kind of things. I just was.
Yeah, it's fun.
But oh yes, the Indians. Oh my goodness, I loved the Indians.
Well, and you know what, Mark? They'll always be the Indians to me.
And me.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And if I could make a living on talking Indians baseball from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, even up until 3 years ago, I would do it.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I mean, I still watch baseball a fair amount, not as much as I used to, but yeah, still pretty much a fair amount.
Who's your favorite Indian of all time?
Joe Carter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Joe Carter was probably my first favorite Indians player. Corey Snyder was also up there too.
I have 4 that tie for first place. They go Toby Harrah was my first favorite Indian, and then Brooke Jacoby, then Kenny Lofton, and then most recently Grady Sizemore.
That's a good choice. Oh, Grady Sizemore would probably be in my top 5. I liked him a lot.
All right, I guess this is a college football show, so
a pleasure
anything
to talk
else for us tonight.
No, that's all, Mark. I know you got other callers. A pleasure to talk college football, 80s and 90s Indians baseball, whatever comes up with you.
Thank you, David. Appreciate it.
One.
Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Joey Daglio, thank you so much for the Super Chat contribution. We appreciate that. Penn State at number 8. And yes, Roger Dodger, Kenny Lofton, a really good player who's a borderline Hall of Famer. All right. We've got a Super Chat coming in from Larry. I feel your rankings were really fair, Mark. I know one team chapped you to put ahead of the Bucknuts. They did, but I got to go with the results on the field in the championships. And again, had that been a different Michigan program, meaning a lesser Michigan program heading into 21, and I thought it was more just a 2-year push. And again, this is also a projection into 23. So I hope everyone understands where I'm going with this. This is not a prediction, but it's still, yes, there is a visionary portion of this as well. And that's Michigan has arguably the best quarterback in the conference. They've had the best offensive line and should again. They've got the best running back duo in the conference. They just are the most solid at every position unit. Not more talented, but they have less questions than any team in the conference by far. By far. So, Larry, thank you so much for that. In absence of any calls coming in, I did want to go through the various comments and questions that came into the channel concerning our rankings. So let's get to those. Because again, there's a lot of people that, and I get it, there are probably a ton of things that I watch on YouTube that are 30 minutes long, and I kind of lose track of, okay, what are they debating? What's the criteria? So I get it. So I'm trying to be a little bit more lenient than I would normally be, because I go off on some people at times, say, listen, that's one of my favorite responses to give. You didn't listen to the video. I write that back to people all the time. You obviously didn't listen. So we've got some comments coming in. And again, please use the link and call in to the show. So let's go to the rankings here. Wild Duke 474. LSU has more championships this century than everyone not named Bama. 3 different head coaches, and you have them third. Really, that's the definition of a great program. First of all, I don't have LSU third. I don't know what you're looking at there, Wild Duke. I have them 6th. So I don't really get where he came up with third. There's a big 6 next to the number, and then it's LSU. So I don't know where you came up with that. And again, it's not an all-time ranking. What happened in 2004, I'm not going to say has absolutely no bearing or impact on today, but it obviously lessens every year. And I only have to take a small consideration of, again, Oklahoma is where they're ranked in these rankings because of who they are to a certain extent and what they've accomplished recently, not in 2022, certainly, but in 21 and 20 and 19 and 18. Texas hasn't done anything on the field, albeit they went to a Big 12 championship game and won the Sugar Bowl 5 seasons ago. But other than that, nothing for 15 years. But they are weighted so heavily in revenue, resources, facilities, recruiting, and potential, and now in the best conference in America, that all those things weigh into it. But LSU winning national championships in 2004 and 2011, and even in 2019 under a different coach, again, let's understand that what Dabo Swinney accomplished at Clemson has more bearing on Clemson's ranking right now because he's still the head coach, as opposed to LSU and Ed Orgeron being completely absent from the program now, and everybody on that coaching staff gone. It's not the same program to a large extent. Lauke mentions here, you got Louisville at 41. That's not even realistic as a program. I have no idea what that means. What does that even mean? You got Louisville at 41. That's not even realistic. Does he mean that's too high or is it too low? I have no idea because it's not unrealistic. It's accurate. Okay, I always love these kind of comments. Adrian says, where you have the U on your list? I post videos for a reason, you knucklehead. Adrian, don't be a moron and ask moronic questions. If you don't want to watch the video, don't watch the video. But don't ask me where somebody was ranked. All right. Larry's joining us tonight. Larry, how you doing tonight?
Good. I wish I had these second world problems like Ohio State and Texas and Oklahoma. So,
well, your program's doing pretty darn good.
Yeah, they're doing good. They're not Ohio State. They're not Texas, USC. So they're doing okay. They're trying to climb up there, but it's just, it's so hard to hear people who, it's just, my golden toilet's bigger than your golden toilet. Well, no, it's not. It's like, oh my gosh, really? So, and I, like I said in the chat or in my super chat, I know that had to chap your butt to have to put Michigan above Ohio.
And I think you'll understand that, again, I don't want to call them intangible because they're not intangible, but they're not hard facts. They're more nuanced metrics. In a lot of ways, I still believe Ohio State's a better program, but I have to honor the 2 championships and the 2 wins head to head.
Right. I think that, that was a lot of integrity there to do that. So I agree with you there. And I really didn't have a lot of disputes because the criteria you put down is, your brand, your recruiting, your support. So a lot of those blue bloods are going to be at the top, even if LSU, did they make a bowl in 21?
Yes, they lost to Kansas State in something called the Texas Bowl.
Right. They were 6-6
yes.
And then lost their right. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, to try and put somebody above 6 that literally 2 years ago barely made it to a bowl game and lost, that's really hard to do.
Yeah. If LSU was TCU, that's not even a great example, but TCU didn't do much under Gary Patterson since 2017. They wouldn't be number 6. But LSU, obviously, when they hire a coach of Brian Kelly's abilities and his resume, and then they jump to a SEC championship game and win 10 games, then there's more credibility behind that, and it's more believable that it is going to continue than if that happened at NC State.
Right. And so, I mean, you had USC at 7, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah, which is a little high, but also fair due to the criteria. in my opinion, because I mean, they're one of the programs with one of the highest ceilings of any program out there due to many different aspects between recruiting and resources, location. I mean, they would be top 5 if their record was different, I would imagine. No, agree, disagree?
That USC would be top 5 if
their record over the last 5 years, if their record would have been even 8, 9, 10 win average, they would have been top 5 with the criteria.
I don't know that their record hasn't been that under Clay Helton anyway.
No, they had 1 4-8 year.
Well, they had a 4-8, that he wasn't around for most of it. And he went 5-7 once, but he also won the Rose Bowl. He also won a Pac-12 championship another year. He went. Right. I'm trying to think of his record off the top of my head. It's something like 68-24, something like that. He won like 75% of his games.
Yeah, he did pretty good. He couldn't carry the torch for USC because I'm thinking they're more in the lines of like Ohio State kind of mentality. Like we should be competing for nationals, not trying to win the conference.
Yep.
So, which is always your first goal, but the ceiling is what you shoot for. And so, I didn't disagree with your rankings too much. So I just wanted to
be disagreed with. I have no issue with that. But I also just want people to understand. I would hope that they would understand that this is not an easy thing to do. It's just there's a lot of nuance there. There, again, even though my attempt is to rank these programs today based on right now, there has to be some bearing on what has happened in the past and not just in 2022. There has to be some bearing on trends, and there also has to be something given to the potential, like you just said, of Texas or Texas A&M.
Right, with everything they have backing them. Yeah, fan bases, everything, the whole kit and caboodle.
Yeah, when you match those schools up against Minnesota, who's outperforming them the last few years on the field, then that's where it becomes difficult. One of many ways in which it becomes difficult, because Minnesota's 29-10 the last 3 full college football seasons.
What division is Minnesota in?
They are in the Big Ten Western Division.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Minnesota's been respectable. PJ Fleck, he's done really good. I mean, I'll give him that. But has Minnesota won? I don't know, what year was it? 21. They did really good. They did really good in 21, I believe, right?
Well, they went 11-2 in 19, and then they went 9-4 the last 2 years.
Right. So I mean, it's respectable, but I mean, they haven't got over the hump. But it's like you're saying, they've only got so much to work with. So they're doing pretty good with what they have, but they're also in a weak division.
Sure.
So, that's, I mean, I'm not putting down the SEC. They definitely have the credentials, but I mean, when you're playing 8 conference games and you want to be, awarded because, hey, well, we played a out of conference Power 5, and it's like, are you playing 10 to 11 Power 5s? You're not. So those 4 gimme wins, and I don't know if you've had the discussion about them, the SEC, there's a lot of teams fighting against the 9-game conference schedule, because some of those teams might not make it if they have to add 1 more loss rather than 1 more win. So it's going to hurt their bowl possibilities, and they don't want to do that.
Yeah, I kind of look at it this way. They're all going to play. So there's 14 teams. They're going to play in those 14 games that are currently played against Georgia Southern and the Citadel and UT Chattanooga. They're going to play each other if they would go to a 9-game season. So they're going to go 7-7 in those 14 games versus now. If it's all those FCS schools that are going to get eliminated, then you're eliminating 7 wins. They're going to go from 14-0 in those 14 games to 7-7. So, yeah, there's going to be 7 teams that are going to go from whether it's 8-4 to 7-5 or 6-6 to 5-7, whatever the case might be. But they may keep those FCS games and knock out more reasonable, higher level group of 5, which they almost win all of those too. So you're probably trading in 13-1 for 7-7.
Right. Unless it's Texas A&M and App State.
Yes,
right?
unless it's Texas A&M that's going to fall flat on its face against an App State. Yes, not even a good App State team. That was their worst team in 5 or 6 years too. They went 6-6. Larry, can you see the comment that's on the screen?
I cannot. I'm on StreamYard, so I can't. Let me see if I can.
Ken Stewart commented 6 hours ago, you put Utah ahead of Oregon. Utah has not won a Rose Bowl in, well, never. Oregon's won 5 Rose Bowls and a Fiesta Bowl this last decade. Oregon's won 5 Rose Bowls in the last decade. Wow, I must have been the Rose Bowls I was watching must not have been the Rose Bowls that Oregon was playing in. That they won 5 Rose Bowls in the last decade.
I think Stanford actually, since it's been the Pac-12, might have the most wins. 5. Wow, I'm shocked.
Well,
Oregon, Utah. I mean, I could see why he might say that, but Utah's been to the last 4 conference championships. I mean, COVID, unless you want to count COVID, which Oregon wasn't even supposed to be in the conference championship.
So there's one of their conference championships. Yes, that they went 4-3 that year.
Yeah, they went 4-3. And
so we've got a guy questioning my intelligence, but he's citing 5 Rose Bowl wins in the last decade. What in the world is he talking about? What have they won? 3? Let's see. They beat Wisconsin in 2011. And
I think wasn't FSU a Rose Bowl in the first
a playoff game. Okay.
So almost 10 years ago.
In 2019.
They got absolutely embarrassed in the COVID year by Iowa State.
Yeah. And just, again, this is a current ranking, and Utah swept them 2 years ago. And like you say, they've been to 4 conference championship games in a row, aside from the 2020 season, and they've won the last 2 conference championships.
Correct.
So winning the Rose Bowl would have been nice, but they were on their way to losing Rose Bowls by winning a conference against Utah or against Oregon. I feel very comfortable ranking Utah slightly ahead of Oregon. Again, people get uptight about 12 versus 14, or I believe those were the 2 rankings there, 12 and 14 for Utah and Oregon, but that can still be razor close.
It is. It's razor close. You've got them within a couple, and Utah's won back-to-back. Okay, you gave credit. You're an Ohio State fan. You just gave Michigan credit for back-to-back conference championships. You've just done the exact same thing for Utah over Oregon. Your bias can't be conflated, because you've done the exact same thing to Utah that you did to Ohio, that you did for Michigan. Correct? Really? Yes. Yeah. So it shows to me that you're pretty steady in your view. So Oregon, where is Ben? Is Exploring with Ben? Is Ben on?
He's been in the chat. I don't. We've got Lemansky chiming in with Hawkeyes put in an appropriate spot. Loved the comments on Kansas State and Coach Snyder. Bill coming out of retirement and winning again. Great coach comments throughout. Thank you, Lemansky. I appreciate that.
Yeah, K-State's another team that's on the rise. I think they've been rising for quite a while. So weren't they the Oklahoma Killers?
Yes.
With Lincoln
3
Riley?
out of the last 4.
Yeah. Yeah. So No, K-State's pretty good. You're the only loss that Oklahoma had there for a while in conference under Lincoln Riley. So they're pretty good. Just like, I guess TCU is Texas's kryptonite.
Yeah.
So, and
6-2. No, they're 8-2 the last 10 years against Texas.
TCU is.
Yes.
Yeah. And their little brother, aren't they?
Yeah, they're supposed to be.
Yeah. Well, looks like little brother grew up. So poor Texas. All right. Well, I just wanted to call in and give you 2 cents. So
I appreciate it, Larry. Have a good
appreciate
night.
you, Mark.
Good to have you here. Thanks. It's our guy, Larry, Utah Utes fan, smart college football fan, loves to drop by and talk Utes in the Pac-12 and the nation. And yeah, this is all a lot of fun. And there is no particular metric that goes into it. I could build some kind of a system, but I believe that it is just more effective and it's more fun and it's more interesting to be more nuanced to say, here's the criteria. If I just made it a kind of record ranking and said, okay, we're going to line up the best records in the last 5 years, well, that wouldn't necessarily be accurate because, again, some programs are so much different. Is the Alabama program that much different today than it was 5 years ago in 2018? Is the Clemson program that much different? Is the Georgia program that much different? Despite having a head coaching change, is the Ohio State program that much different than it was in 2018? No, 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 and no. But is the Stanford program much different in 2023 than it was in 2018, coming off a 9-4 season? I believe it is. Is the TCU program maybe not a whole lot different from a quality standpoint, but from the standpoint of leadership, much different than they were 5 years ago? Is the Tennessee program much different today than it was 5 years ago? The Michigan State program, just in the last 5 years, has gone through the declining years of D'Antonio, which he was still a good coach. They were still a good team, but not anything close to what they were 2011, 12, 13, 14, 15. And then Mel Tucker, boom, spikes with 11 wins and a top 10 finish. And then down this past season at 5-7 and loses his quarterback and his best wide receiver and is not looking at a good forecast for 2023. Washington, what has happened to that program in the last 5 years? So again, we could have a metric-based, very, very technical, formulaic system to say these are the best programs because of these records in the last 5 years, the last 4 years, the last 3 years, whatever. Or we can give it more nuance because, again, who had a better record last year, Minnesota or Texas A&M? If I had you take over a college football program, which program would you rather take to make money and succeed with wins and championships on the field? I'm taking Texas A&M. And I love what Minnesota has done. I love what Wisconsin's done historically. I love what Kansas State, Larry and I just talked about it. And before I take this next call here, if Joey wants to jump in here, he can let me know, or if he's just working behind the scenes. Folks, if you're not real familiar, maybe you've only been a fan for, let's say, 5 years. If you're not real familiar with what Bill Snyder did at Kansas State, we don't give Kansas State a whole lot of time and a whole lot of play here just because nobody talks about them. I talk about them. I try to talk about them. I give them their due, but they don't get a whole lot of airplay here because nobody asks about them, because they get discarded because they're never signing any 5 stars, hardly ever signing any 4 stars or any of that. But go back, and I've got a bookmarked site. It's called Historical Scores, and it will show you the score of every game and every season for every college football team. And all you have to do is click on West Virginia, and you can go through every season. If you want to click on Kansas State, and go back to like the mid 80s. Go back to like from the 60s through the 70s through the 80s, you're going to see they should have probably given up on football. You're going to see 1-10, 0-11, 2-9, 3-8, 0-11, just over and over. Horrible seasons. Bill Snyder got there, and within 3 years, they're winning 8 and 9 games and going to good bowl games. Then another 4, 5, 6 years later, they're competing for national championships. It's astounding what he accomplished there. All right, we're going to bring our buddy Joey in here. Joey, what's going on tonight?
Oh, not a lot. I was going to come in and promote something. So we're going to run a special in the store for the next 24 hours. You can go to topqualityshirts.com. You can get T-shirts, tennis shoes, anything you really want, even yoga pants. I don't want to see some of you guys in them yoga pants. But anyway, you can get anything you want from the store. If you use the code live tonight, all one word, live tonight, LIBETONIGHT, at checkout, we're going to give you free shipping. Something I've noticed a lot of is abandoned carts. So like you're coming in, you're putting a lot of items in your cart and you're not checking out. And maybe it's the shipping. I don't know. I wish we could control the shipping prices, but we can't. Unfortunately, federal government's got to do that. So anyway, live tonight, use that code for the next 24 hours. We're going to give you free shipping on any product that you buy. And that's only for 24 hours. So jump in there and do that.
Hey, Joey, we had a conversation, you and I, the other day. You've come to the conclusion that there's a lot of people on here that join us for these shows that aren't necessarily subscribed to YouTube or do not have a YouTube or a Google account. Correct?
Right. So here's what happens a lot of time, and I can look at the analytics and everything and stuff and see this. People will search out college football on Google, for instance, and they'll see the Mark Rogers, the voice of college football, and they'll click on it, and they're watching it on YouTube. They're watching the show, but they're not subscribed to the channel because they haven't logged into YouTube. So if you'll just log into YouTube, and you can do that if you've got a Gmail account, it's really easy to log into YouTube. Just sign in with your Gmail account. They call it a channel, so it looks like you're creating a channel. And you think you got to create videos and stuff. It's not that at all. You're just joining YouTube as your Gmail account, and then just search for the Voice of College Football once again in the search bar, and you'll come back to us and subscribe us up. Because I notice a lot of people watching that are not subscribers, and that's great. We love having you here, that's for sure. But if you can just log into YouTube and subscribe, that's a great help. And not only that, there are so many team channels. So you could be a West Virginia fan, Oklahoma, Florida, Oregon, USC. Hey, we got a great guest coming up on USC channel next week. Mark, I can't remember who that is. I'm sorry, the name slipped in my mind.
Yeah, next Sunday night, everyone. So this is Sunday, June 4th on the USC channel that we will simulcast that show right here on the main channel. So every Sunday night at 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific, Tim Prangley and Rick and I get together for Trojan Conquest Live. And next Sunday, they've got Anthony Munoz.
Yeah.
Arguably the greatest left tackle in the history of both college and pro football on as a guest. So it's difficult to get guests like that. So a guest of that stature, check it out. It's going to be a great show. That's next Sunday at 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific.
And that's going to be a great show. And just to show you that that's not just on one channel. So like the West Virginia channel, we've interviewed Daryl Talley, Don Nealon, we're going to, in the future, have Geno Smith, Tavon Austin on the West Virginia channel, things like that. So, come on over and join these channels too, because you never know when something's going to stream on a certain channel, an Oregon channel, for instance, that may not be on the main channel. We always try to share it on there, but you never know. So, that be a subscriber to every channel and turn your notifications on, because you don't want to miss a great interview out there with some of these coaches and players.
Folks, we want to make it as easy on all of you to find the content as possible, but you need to understand, because if there weren't such a thing as algorithms and all of that, and I could just throw everything on the main channel, we would have shows running on here all the time, and we would throw every piece of content on the main channel so you could all see it. But YouTube would not treat that very kindly. So we can only put so much content on here. We don't want to, I used to put so much content on this main channel that some people loved it, but I used to have people comment all the time and they'd say, Mark, I'm frustrated because I can't find what I want. There's too much here. And that's why it's not the main reason, but it's one reason that we built out solid channels that focus on those particular teams. So if you're an Ohio State fan, if you're a West Virginia fan, you're a Michigan fan, you can just lock in on those and know that everything related to those teams is going to be on those channels. Some of these guests that our guy, Dale Longley, the Wolfman, has brought on the West Virginia channel. So our West Virginia channel is a diamond in the rough. It's a find that many of you need to make, even if you're not a West Virginia fan. If you love hearing from top-notch people on the college football landscape, and it's not even always just college football. My goodness, Roy Williams was on there the other day.
Yeah, Roy Williams and Jay Paterno from Penn State on there. I mean, some of these guests that the Wolfman can grab is unreal. And Wolfman's been in this business for a long time, great friend of mine. But yeah, some of these guests, and one thing that I will tell you too, and I guess I'm kind of spoiling the surprise for most of you, but that's okay. I know at some point we will be interviewing Rich Rodriguez, and I know a lot of Mountaineer fans were talking, hey, we want Rich Rod back in Morgantown. We will be interviewing Rich Rod here before long, probably on this main channel with Mark Rogers. I can't promise that, can't guarantee that, but we're trying really hard, and we're gonna do everything we can to make that happen. So that would be an interesting conversation.
Yeah, I got to say, Joey, when you go after something, you usually pull through. And even if we don't get him for whatever reason, I know that you did your damnedest to make it happen.
Yeah, and sometimes it takes a while. It took us a while to get Neil Brown. I've been working on that since December, and we just got him 2 weeks ago. So and it happens like that sometimes. So we're going to have another one that I'm trying to reach out to is Jimbo Fisher. I know that a lot of people would like to see an interview with Jimbo Fisher, so I'm reaching out to him. So we're going to have some big time guests on this show. So you guys just stay tuned. Make sure your notifications are turned on so you'll see when they come out. But one more time, and I'm gonna get out of here. You go to topqualityshirts.com. You can get your Voice of College Football gear there, or you can go to thevoiceofcollegefootball.com and get to it that way. Use the code LIVE TONIGHT, LIVETONIGHT, all lowercase, and you'll get free shipping for the next 24 hours. That's all I got, Mark. And
hey, Joey, can you do us a favor and type up a banner and we can put it up?
I'm not on your side of the screen, Art. I'm on mine.
I got you. I'll type up a banner, and that's Live Tonight with a promo code. Gotcha.
Right. Live Tonight with a promo code. All right.
And again, I think some of the names that Joey just threw out might have passed right by some people. So I don't know that everyone appreciates how difficult it is to get a major college football coach on a one-on-one interview, because they talk to the media during the season every week and in August. And so about 5 months of the year, they're talking to the media every week. So their basic response is, we're not giving out individual interviews because you can get on the conference call with the rest of the media. And then even throughout the off season, they're on the road, they're recruiting, they're running a football program, and they very rarely will do an individual interview. So for us to get Neil Brown in West Virginia, and for us to work on guys like Rich Rodriguez and then also Jimbo Fisher, that will be a phenomenal interview if we can pull that one off. So don't just enjoy it yourself. Understand that we will have the ability to get more and more of these interviews if you go out and share it and let people know Jimbo Fisher is going to be on the Voice of College Football, for example. Your latest example would be Neil Brown was on the Voice of College Football. Check this out.
Yeah. Let everybody know wherever you go, if you're on 260 or 365 or 247, whatever, 24/7, whatever you're on, if you're on 3, let people know there that they can come over and watch an interview with Neil Brown. You see somebody talking about West Virginia, send them to our video with Neil Brown. Hey, I guarantee you it will help support the channel 100%, and we'll grow, get bigger, and you guys will get all the coaches you want interviewed in the future.
I think, Joey, based on the way we do it here, it's a grassroots effort. So people get the benefit of being able to have direct access to me and our other hosts and to talk to us all the time. You guys don't get that on other shows necessarily. And there are some really good college football shows out there, but you don't necessarily get to talk to the host anytime you want to. And for that same benefit going in the other direction, because we approach it from a very grassroots kind of standpoint, and it's not a big operation, then also understand that we need your help, and we really appreciate you guys spreading the word.
That's right.
In any way that you can.
One more thing too, and I'm gonna let Mark talk on this. I'm gonna get out of here, but we're looking for some people on individual channels. If you're an Oregon fan or a USC fan or a Georgia fan, whatever, we need people on those channels to help us. If you know about video editing, uploading to YouTube, things like that, get in touch with me or Mark and stuff, and let's discuss. If you're interested in contributing to the Voice of College Football an hour, maybe 2 hours a week, whatever, let us know. We could sure use your help, especially on an individual channel. So,
absolutely. I created a post on all of the channels today or yesterday, and it looks something like this, to which you can respond, where we, again, are looking for people who would like to edit videos. And so you can hit us up at, again, you can always hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail, also Football News Hour at Gmail. So we created that post for every channel to see. It's a great way for you guys to help out the channel. We can discuss how we can benefit you. And then also you can get the firsthand look at our content for your favorite team.
Not to mention, if you're looking to do a YouTube channel in the future, and maybe you've got the software and you're just wanting to learn about editing, this is a great way to get your feet wet. We'd be glad to help you get started. And that way, in the future, you want to start your own YouTube channel, you've got a little bit of knowledge about it. So, all right, Mark, I'm going to get out of here, buddy.
Thanks, Joey. Appreciate you. Have a good night. All right, let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. Again, a lot of people made some nice comments about the commentary I made about Bill Snyder's work at Kansas State. I just dropped a link to the video that I posted on Bill Snyder's career when he retired that was well received by everyone. So I appreciate that. So if you're interested, check that out. I've posted that in the chat. And then also a number of people are asking where certain teams were ranked. Please check out the videos. You can scroll right through them. Obviously, they're long videos, but I wanted to be exhaustive and comprehensive is a better word. I wasn't exhaustive, or I could talk for 5 hours about Texas A&M, for example, but they're comprehensive. I wanted to give reason and substance for a minute to 90 seconds on each team to let you know why they were ranked, where they are ranked. But check out the videos, and at this point, you can just scroll through them, see where the teams are ranked. I'm not going to go through all the individual rankings. Welcome to the Voice of College Football, the real MVP.
Hello, Mark. How are you doing this evening?
I am doing just fine. How are you?
I'm doing good. Well, I saw your list, and I agreed with most of it. I thought it was a really solid list. The only team I had somewhat of an issue with was Florida. I know they've had a historic past. I know in 2020 they went and almost beat Alabama in the SEC championship game. That season's weight is just kind of put on the individual person, in my opinion, because of COVID. But I just don't think they're 21 right now. I would put them kind of 27, 28 range personally.
Okay.
I mean, they could bounce back with Billy and Napier, but I haven't seen any real indication that it's headed that direction.
No, I understand that. That's fair. I would also consider that Dan Mullen was able, and Dan Mullen, I don't think is a great football coach. He's not a great football coach. Otherwise, he'd still be the coach at Florida. He would not let his oddities get in the way of him being a good X's and O's coach and builder of a program. But he did. Therefore, he's not the coach anymore. But Dan Mullen was able to take a 4-win football program, and not just in that 2020 season, but the 2 seasons prior to that. He won 3 consecutive New Year's 6 games. He went 10-3, 11-2, and then 8-4 and finished in the top 10 3 consecutive seasons.
You're right, and that's very impressive. I just didn't know how much of this ranking was looking on the past versus kind of looking forward.
Well, it's right now. This ranking is right this second, but obviously you have to look to the past to see. It gives you all sorts of indicators. And that indicator to me is that Florida can elevate like that.
Yeah, I agree with you. They can. I just don't think Billy Napier is the guy that's going to elevate them that way. So I think they're going to have a few more 5-7, 6-6 type seasons before they get back that way.
Well, this looks like one of them.
Exactly.
You're right.
And I mean, this season, like, I think they're below Iowa, Kentucky level football, Kansas State. Those are the teams you had immediately behind them right now. Now, I think they can easily pass them.
Yes. I understand where you're coming with that. And that's where it becomes difficult to weight the results on the field and the record versus what that school has done in the past. And I mean recent past. I'm not talking historically. I'm talking about very recent past, and therefore what their ability and their ceiling is. Would you rather put your money on Minnesota, Kansas State, those type of programs, Illinois, that were all better football teams than Florida last year? Or would you rather have Florida's recruiting and money and be in the SEC and all of that?
Well, I know this is going to sound weird, but it just depends on what you value. Because if you value making the college football playoffs, I think there's a legitimate argument Minnesota's more likely than Florida going forward with the 12-team playoff. Because Florida's got 7 or 8 teams that I think are just ahead of them, whereas Minnesota's only got 3 or 4.
If we had the patience to wait 15 years, I would put money on Florida making more college football playoff appearances than Minnesota.
Oh, yeah. If we expanded to that long of a timetable, I would agree with you. I think a large part of Minnesota's success is because of their head coach, the boat rower. But once he leaves, I don't know where they're going to be at. But they've got a great head coach, and they've been able to keep him, so they deserve some credit for keeping him.
And that's another interesting portion you bring up, because we can go one way or the other on how important the coach is and either elevate the program because we think the coach is so good, but also we could knock the program down being it very reliant on the coach, meaning that we believe in Florida money, resources, tradition, fan base, popularity, support, recruiting, all that. Minnesota, we pretty much believe in a coach. So once the coach leaves, then who knows where they'll be. Not that they couldn't go out and get another good coach, because they've had other good ones in the past, but it's less likely. Florida, it's more about the program. And therefore, you can make the argument, well, Minnesota maybe should be rated higher because their coach is that good and he's there right now. And I'm ranking them right now.
Oh, I get it, Mark. I get it. This is somewhat subjective, and that's what makes every list fun and interesting to talk about.
Yeah.
Especially with your criteria. I mean, people value it differently.
Yeah. I don't know if you heard my comment that we could make this very regimented and say, I'm just taking all the records from the last 3 years and maybe make some kind of, here's the record from the last 3 years, here are the recruiting rankings from the last 3 years, and build some kind of formula and just throw it out there and say, I didn't give it any thought. I just did numbers. And there it is. There are your program rankings.
I mean, you could do that, but Mark, you and I both know college football is a lot more in depth than just here's the record. Here's what the numbers show. And there's a lot more context that needs to be added.
Yes.
And I mean, part of that context, have you seen some of the win totals from that have come out?
Yes.
I found it interesting that all 4 of the Big Ten schools that are added are not even projected to make a bowl game. I think one might have been at 6, but I mean, none of them are projected to go 7-5, 8-4 type. And that kind of alludes back to what you were saying with quality of competition earlier.
Yeah, I don't remember those 4 numbers off the top of my head, but I thought they were all 5.5 to 6.5 range.
I think one was at 4.5 or even 4.
West Virginia was at 4.5.
Yeah, well, I mean, West Virginia, I mean, they're kind of in shambles at the Big 12. They're at the bottom end of the totem pole. So I know Joey probably doesn't appreciate that, but hey, the results on the field don't lie. When you lose to Kansas in overtime by 2 scores, which is just a miracle in itself, that's bad.
Yeah, it's a make or break year for Neil Brown, that's for sure.
Yeah, I'm happy Neil Brown actually was able to face the media. I figured if your coach is kind of on the hot seat, he would just get as far away from the media as possible. He would just go into hiding.
Yeah, the only thing I had to promise him that I was just sticking to football.
Because that was what Joey, when he said Jimbo Fisher, I thought, oh, when Jimbo Fisher gets on with people on the internet talking to him with that chat, every question will be about Nick Saban, or he should get fired, or he's the complete most overrated head coach in the history of football. So I just find it interesting.
Yeah, if we get Jimbo Fisher on here, that's where I'm going to have to do my best to throw out topics and hope that he goes on a rant. I'll throw out NIL, and I'm not going to pin him to the wall on, how much is NIL helping you or anything, but just throw out, the environment of NIL and how it's working there at Texas A&M and what are some of the issues or problems, and see if he kind of takes the bait and runs wild with it, because he's a bit of a loose cannon.
A bit might be the biggest understatement I've heard all show. A bit of a loose cannon is like saying you're David Greenshield is a bit of an Ohio State fan.
Yes.
I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me at all. But how hard is it going to be to do these program rankings in 2024 with Texas and Oklahoma, USC, UCLA making these moves? Because I can make a legitimate argument. You're 7th or 8th in the SEC. You go 6-6, 5-7. Well, I think you're better than Big 12 teams or Pac-12 teams that go 8-4, 7-5.
Yeah. So give me an example.
Oklahoma. Let's say they go 7-5, but they lose to LSU, Georgia, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and they scheduled Oklahoma State out of conference one year, and they lost to them on a game-winning field goal or something like that.
So they're going 4-4 in the SEC, and maybe they beat Missouri, Arkansas, A&M, and Florida.
Right.
So those are 4 decent wins, but then they lost to 4 either really good or fringe top 25 teams.
Right.
Yeah, they're going to have a difficult schedule, and it's similar to what I told David. David Greenshield was bringing up Texas struggling in the SEC, and I said, well, relating that to the program rankings, and I said that I'm going to have to try to navigate that, but the way I navigate it now is I don't really look at the record unless I look at the context of the record within the league. So if Texas is still doing what Texas is doing now on the field, but it translates to another loss or 2, then to me, it's the same program, even though they've got a worse record.
Yeah, I understand that, Mark, and I would agree with that. But, you'll be accused of SEC bias, Big Ten bias, and all that sort of stuff. Picking on the little guy.
I would have loved to have seen Florida play a Pac-12 schedule last year, for example.
I know. Imagine if they played the Pac-12 champion. What would have happened? Who would ever be able to figure out this hypothetical question? If only we had a time machine and can go back.
They also did play the 5th place team in the Pac-12.
Yeah, but they had 20-some players opt out because bowl games are basically meaningless now, according to the fans, and the players have taken that on. And unfortunately, I only see that problem getting worse with the new playoff expansion. I mean,
yeah,
we might have to get some XFL or USFL guys in here with how little roster spots they're going to be. I mean, what was it? LSU against Kansas State had 39 scholarship players playing that game or something a few years ago?
Yeah, it was bad.
I mean, you can't get anything off these games. I understand no excuses, look at the scoreboard, but at some point, you're missing 25, 35 players. I mean,
yeah,
not even Alabama or Georgia can overcome that.
Somebody had the idea, and I don't think it would work, but it's interesting to think about possibly playing bowl games before the season starts.
Can you elaborate on this idea?
It's not my idea, but I've seen it thrown out that people have said these players wouldn't opt out if we played the bowl games before the season started. So not every bowl game, but let's take the Gasparilla Bowl and play Wake Forest and Missouri in August, week 0, and call it the Gasparilla Bowl, and they play at a neutral site, and it's an opening weekend game.
I mean,
again, it kind of flies in the face of everything that bowl games are. They're supposed to be played during the holidays to give us football entertainment during the holidays. They're supposed to be based on a reward for the season and also a fair matchup for what the season produced, where you see an 8-4 team playing an 8-4 team basically in a bowl game. So they're like matchups. But I'm just saying, because of all the opt-outs, I just heard it suggested by somebody of possibly playing these games, or maybe you clear out a week in the season, later in the season, but not real late, maybe week 8, week 9, and you make it a wild card weekend, and you determine about 2 weeks before that who's going to play, and you make them all non-conference games, and you put them at neutral sites. I'm spitballing off the top of my head. I know that wouldn't work from a logistical standpoint for fans to go to the games, but let's say we're at week 9, and so everybody's got 8 games played, and you match up a bunch of 6-2 teams and 5-3 teams and 7-1 teams, and you go play neutral site games, and that's where we get some of our bowl games without players opting out. Mark, it's kind of like a February frenzy kind of matchup.
Exactly. I appreciate that major concern you had was the fans, but let's be honest, realistic. The fans don't matter anymore, basically. I mean, you're asking in a 12-team playoff them to go to what, Arizona, then Texas, then California or something like that, and back-to-back weeks?
Well, let's distinguish that. The paying fans, the ticket buyers don't matter. The fans matter. The fans that are watching advertising, they matter.
Okay, the people that show up the game.
Yes, they don't matter.
Yeah, well, that's what I always, when people think of fans, I assume that's what everybody thinks of when they consider fans. I don't consider some guy watching a game on TV being a fan.
We're not fans?
I mean, that's just a casual fan of mine.
I haven't been to a game in like 7 years. I'm not a college football fan.
Well, I don't know how many people, when they conceptualize the word fan, don't think about people at sporting events. It's the first thing I think of.
I think of anyone who supports the team.
I agree with that definition. I just think when you say the word fan, I think it's just somebody at a sporting event. It's the first thing they have.
I have no issue with any fan who calls their coach our coach, or calls the team and the decisions that are made. We did this and we did that. We lost, we won, we went for it on fourth. I have no issue with that, because a lot of people are down on that because, well, you're not playing, you're not coaching. And I do get that perspective, but you know what? If those people didn't exist, if we did not exist, they wouldn't exist. They would be playing flag football somewhere, intramural flag football. They'd be pumping gas. That's what they would be doing. Or the really smart ones would still be in school, but they would be majoring in whatever they're currently majoring in. But their first and foremost goal would be to attain a career in that field and not playing football. So we're really important in all this, because if we don't pony up the cash, and that includes everybody who doesn't spend a penny on, just by watching, you are supporting it, because you are driving numbers that drive advertisers to spend millions and billions of dollars. So we support the sport. The sport only exists because of us.
Oh, I agree with that. And I actually agree with that so much. I think some of the corporate executives at some of these TV companies probably should remember that when making decisions. Because I think if you get too far away from what the original meaning of the sport is, then you're going to lose those fans, or a portion of those fans at the very minimum. So I agree with everything you said. I would even go as far to say, Mark, that you made a Jimbo Fisher-like rant just then.
Okay. Hopefully it was a little more understandable. I don't talk quite as fast as he does.
No, but you had the same passion and vigorosity when you talked. So I enjoyed it very much.
Well, DeReal, we appreciate you being here. Do you have anything else for us tonight?
Oh, no, I thank you for having me on, Mark. It's always good talking to you.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here. Have a good night.
You do the same.
Okay, folks, we produced, what is it? I guess it's 5 videos, right? We produced programs 133 up to 100. Then we did a 99 up to 75 video. We did 74 up to 51. We did 50 up to 26, and we did a top 25 video. And basically, because we didn't want to make the videos too long, they're all run somewhere between 25 and 35 minutes. And so I thought I would start to scroll them there, and you can see there's no way I can pick and choose and show you all the rankings. That's why I've asked everyone, check out the rankings before you jump on here and ask questions and make comments. But we'll let the video scroll here, and you'll see some of the rankings here. Yes, Dave. Dave is asking whether I asked Neil Brown if he's going to be fired this year. Yes, I actually started with that question. Interview skills number 1, you just fire your most lethal question right out of the gate. You don't warm them up in any way possible. You just hit them with a haymaker right out of the gate. Yes, made for a great interview. Absolutely. We are getting some folks that are clamoring for Chris. We don't know where Chris is. Yes, Mozart's Ghost. Great comment there. Yes, the fans have to identify with the team for all of this to work. You are a fan because you love the sport. I know that just about all of you love watching football. So you'll watch other teams besides your team because you love the competition, the strategy, the action, all of that, the intensity of the game. But first and foremost, you love your team and you have identity with that team. And this is how it all works. This is what doesn't work about the transfer portal and NIL. And this is the point I've tried to make a number of times, is that while I agree conceptually with the transfer portal, freedom of choice in this country, fully believe in that. I can stop running a YouTube channel tomorrow if I want, and I can start selling insurance if somebody wants to buy insurance off me. You know, I can choose to do what I want as long as I'm capable at doing it. So, and students who are not receiving athletic scholarships, maybe they're just paying for their tuition and room and board and so forth, or maybe they are receiving an academic scholarship, have every right and do pick up and leave and go to a different school and transfer to another school. Okay. They're given that freedom. So I believe in freedom of choice. I believe in the transfer portal from the standpoint that it allows us as Americans to choose. And I believe in NIL because if the 13-year-old, and I'm exaggerating, I guess they can't, I think that there is some type of payment limitation in terms of your age. But if the 16-year-old can get on TikTok and make videos and make $100,000 for senseless, stupid dance videos on TikTok, well, these players making and creating and fueling a billion-dollar industry should be able to benefit and profit from their name, image, and likeness. Absolutely. Again, conceptually, I believe in it. However, Mozart speaks to exactly what the issue is. You are not going to be as invested, as attached to your team because you are loyal to your team. You're not a Texas A&M fan one year, and then the next year you're a Georgia fan, then the next year you're a Kansas fan, and then the fourth year you're a Stanford fan. No, you're a Texas A&M fan. I bet that there are very few people in this chat right now who have ever been fans of multiple football teams. I doubt. I know that some of you are a little flaky when it comes to that. Like, Michigan's my favorite team, but Minnesota's my second favorite team. I never really understood that. I get that maybe you grew up in Michigan, but then you went as a student to the University of Minnesota. I understand. Or you married somebody and they're a fan of Minnesota, so then you kind of became a Minnesota fan. Okay, fine. I don't believe in that. I don't. My kids, they found it funny once they started to really become involved in sports themselves, and of course, they were ingrained to be. They grew up exactly right in step with me, and to this day, even though they're not at 26 and 24 years old as big a baseball fans or Ohio State fans as they were when they were, let's say, 15, that those are still their teams. And those are the only clothes they wear, the only gear they wear. If you would have walked into my son's bedroom when he was 14 years old, it was just wall to wall Ohio State Buckeyes, Cleveland Browns, Cleveland Indians everywhere, Cleveland Cavaliers everywhere. And that's all he watched. That's all he cared about. He watched other sports and other teams, but those were his teams. Why were those his teams? Because of me. Even though he grew up in Connecticut and every kid in his class was a Red Sox or a Yankees fan, he was an Indians fan because of his old man. And I ingrained that in him. And so there's something special about college athletics where, except for the infrequent graduate transfer that moved from school to school, other than that infrequent situation, you knew that your guys were your guys and they weren't going to go play for the enemy. And so while these things are conceptually good things, and in principle and in practicality, they're good things for the individual, they're not good for the industry. They're not good for the fan. They're not good for the whole. And that's player movement. It's not good for the sport, and it's going to decrease, I predict, it's not going to be catastrophic, but it's going to decrease the level of interest, and it's going to decrease the popularity. And that's not good for me here doing what I'm doing, but I'm just saying, I believe it will decrease the popularity. In Major League Baseball back in the 1970s and throughout the 80s, when labor issues and the salaries and all the ensuing strikes became more prominent and talked about than the actual games on the field, and there was too much player movement, there was always player movement to a certain extent, but the clubs would determine the player movement. And again, I'm not saying that that was right when the clubs basically had indentured servants and they were the only ones who were able to choose when a player moved, because they would either release the player or they would trade the player. And then Curt Flood, if you guys follow me on Curt Flood, made a heroic and brave stance against the industry, and it didn't help him personally, but he paved the way and he became the pioneer. So Curt Flood of the St. Louis Cardinals challenged the system, and it opened the door and the floodgates for free agency. Well, was that good for the sport? Initially, it caused interest, it caused intrigue, it caused excitement in player acquisition, and franchises going out and paying big money to get Reggie Jackson or to get Pete Rose or to get fill in the blank, Steve Garvey. But with all of the player disputes, the unions, the strikes, what happened to Major League Baseball? People got sick of it. They turned it off, because that's what I think people are intrigued by, a little bit of that, a slice of that. They want to hear some business. They're intrigued by the inside baseball talk. And when I say inside baseball, I don't mean inside Major League Baseball in particular. I mean the generic term of inside baseball, meaning the locker room talk, the front office talk. We are all intrigued and interested, or most of us, by the nuts and bolts and the intricacies of how the sport works. But we don't want that to be the overriding conversation, for it all to be about NIL, free agency, transfer portal, salary caps, all of that. And I'm mixing up professional and college intentionally to basically say it's been blurred. The lines have been blurred. And most of us want to have a working knowledge of that and find it interesting. But when that overrides the games and the play on the field and becomes the major talking points, then that's not good. Inside the end zone, we don't know how good Kyle McCord will be. We don't. You are absolutely right. I don't know how good he's going to be, but I can't believe that he's going to step on the field for Ohio State in week 4 versus Notre Dame if he's not good enough. I could see him stepping on the field for Ohio State in week 1 and then throwing 2 or 3 interceptions and only completing 50-some% of his passes, and showing us by week 3 or 4 that he's not ready, and therefore Devin Brown will be the quarterback. So that is the age-old question. We don't know how good Kyle McCord will be, but we did not know how good CJ Stroud was going to be. We did not know how good Justin Fields was going to be. We did not know how good Dwayne Haskins was going to be. We did not know how good JT Barrett was going to be, who was thrust into the role 10 days before the season started as a third stringer. Yes, he was the backup quarterback just days before the season to Cardell Jones, and then he became the starting quarterback. They all worked out. So trust, if you so choose, trust the track record of the coach, the offense, and the talent around him, the play calling ability, the talent. Look at the first team All-American lists that have been unleashed by the various publications and services. When is the last time we saw 2 wide receivers from the same team named first team All-American as what we have right now, with most of the different services and publications naming Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka as first team All-Americans at wide receiver from the same team? Mike 3883, was Stroud good enough against Oregon? What week was that? It was week 2. My point about McCord is that Ohio State plays 3 cream puffs. Now, Indiana is a conference game. They're a Power 5 opponent, but they're awful. They will have, you talk about a bad quarterback situation. Indiana's got one on its hands right now. You talk about playing an inexperienced quarterback. They're going to play an inexperienced quarterback who does not have the weapons nor the high school scouting report that Kyle McCord does. And we outlined that in our Big Ten quarterback rankings video. CJ Stroud was good enough to throw for 464 yards against Oregon. He threw for almost 500 yards. True, he threw a costly interception with 4 minutes left in the game. Midfield, Ohio State's down 35-28 for as poorly as they had played and for as sharp as Oregon was. Ohio State still had the ball at midfield, down by a touchdown, and needed about 50 to 60 yards to tie the game. And Stroud floated a pass and threw a pick that basically ended the game. They got the ball back with 15 seconds left. I do appreciate everybody being here at the Voice of College Football. Does anyone have any more feedback on the program rankings? If you've not checked out the videos, please do so. Check out the videos. We've got 5 release videos. People seem to like them. They give me plenty of feedback. So check those out. We'll be back here Monday night. So our Big Ten live show, the Big Ten live show starts at 6 Eastern. John Diadamo is going to be the host for the first block from 6 to 8. I'll take over at 8 o'clock for the Big Ten live show. In the meantime, I'm going to go to work on all sorts of we're going to present our next series, and that may just be our Disputed National Championships series. I think we're going to go that route. If you have any questions about the program rankings like Immaculate does, I answer all these questions in the series. Are these program rankings where you think they will be ranked next year? No. I am not making a prediction. I am telling you how strong I believe these programs are right this second. I believe that Georgia is the best football program in the country. I believe that Alabama is the second best program in the country. I believe that Michigan is the third best program in the country. I believe Ohio State is the fourth best program in the country. If somebody wants to argue that Ohio State's the third best program and Michigan's the fourth best program, I have no issue with that. I almost determined that. If somebody wants to argue that Michigan's number 2 and Alabama's 3, I have no issue with that. They're not indisputable by any way, shape, or form. But as is mentioned by our guy Conundrum Air, they are nuanced. So I could build a system. And say, this is the system. The system is going to be 1/2 record, it's going to be 1/3 record, 1/3 playoff appearance, performance results in the playoffs, and 1/3 recruiting ranking, which will lead us to project to the future. And I'm not going to give it any thought. That actually determines 0 thought. You just plug in the numbers and say, this team's, what's 3 times 13? 39. This team's 26-13 the last 3 years. Their recruiting ranking averages 13.7, and they have not made any playoff appearances, and their bowl record is 3-1. There you go. And then you compute that out, and then we would just line it up. But no, I am looking at brands. I'm looking at popularity in regards to the level of interest, the level of fan support, which equals dollars. there's more fan support and popularity for Florida State than there is for Illinois. Then I'm also looking at the head coaching position. And again, as I mentioned, and I know people are constantly coming in and out of the chat, so I'm not going to repeat myself 18 times, but as it pertains to the coach, even the coaching is more important for some programs than it is for others, and can be evaluated more accurately for some programs than it can for others. I don't know how good a coach Troy Taylor is going to be at Stanford. He was an exceptional coach at the FCS level with Sacramento State. But Dabo Swinney, we know how much impact he's had on the Clemson program. All right. Appreciate y'all being here at the Voice of College Football. And thank you so much for all your support. We appreciate all that goes on there at the USC channel. I see Tim Prangley in the chat. Keep in mind that Tim gets together with Rick Anaya each and every Sunday night. And boy, they've got a good one lined up for next Sunday. Again, it's next Sunday, and it's Anthony Munoz. And I can't find our fancy slide for Anthony Munoz. This is where I could use it. There we go. Anthony Munoz, June 4th, Sunday night. That's coming down at 5 Pacific time. So please mark your calendars, and we will see you then. But in the meantime, you're going to see me all over the place, because I believe our next series is going to be Disputed National Championships. If I cannot let another offseason go, I don't think I addressed that last offseason. I may have done it the season before. I can't go through another, as I see the end of the video there, offseason without addressing Disputed National Championships. Can't do it. Have to address it. It has to be addressed. We have to get on that. So I'm going to start with 2022. Do you think it's disputed in any way? It's kind of foolish to think that that championship could be disputed, but we're going to go through the technicalities of going through every season. And if you're wondering what I mean by disputing national championships, then you will just have to hang on. If you've not heard that discussion before, you will see what I mean. There are flawed national championships. So we will get on that and start producing those videos. And again, we'll be here for the Big Ten Live show at 6 Eastern on Monday night. We've got our next deep dive with Tony Altimore coming up on Thursday night on the Oregon channel. We're doing an Oregon deep dive. We've already done Michigan, USC, and Florida State. They are a ton of fun and very informative. So join us for that. Oregon coming up on Thursday night. I appreciate all of you. Continue to support in any way possible. You can do that financially. You see the ticker down at the bottom: Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App at MarkRogersTV. Thank you all for your contributions in any such way. Hit the like button on your way out. Share the videos out on social media. Talk us up out there among your college football friends who don't know that we are here, or maybe they know we're here and they forgot. I tell you, I looked at the show that we produced where we did the exact same thing that we did tonight. We reviewed our rankings 1 through 131 at this point last year. And I am astounded at times by how many people's names I see on old videos and old live streams that were locked in, and they seem to very much enjoy what we do, but for some reason they vanished. And so we don't want that to happen. I know there are other things to watch out there, but for some reason, people that were really locked in couldn't get enough, couldn't tell us enough how much they enjoy the content. For some reason, a great majority of those people have vanished. So we want to continue to grow and build and do everything we can to provide the best in discussion, debate, and analysis of college football. Whoa, Nelly, college football game. You're talking my language right here. Why should Georgia claim a 1946 national championship? We've addressed that in the past. We will address it again. I don't exactly off the top of my head know what the answer should be to that question, but believe me, I've reviewed every national championship season, and I have awarded and stripped national championships because of it. And we will do it again, and we will outline it all, and we'll all go on record on video right here at the Voice of College Football. And similar to what we're doing here, I'll produce the videos, and then we'll do live streams. Let's say we'll take a block of like 10 years. We'll do the college football playoff era, and then we'll do a live stream so I can take your calls and questions, and we can answer them head on. And then we'll do the previous decade and the previous decade and so forth. And we will take your calls and questions as we review them. And this is going to, for some of you, you guys are going to love it. Others are going to get pissed off at it. But we are going to logically and objectively look at each season, and we are going to question the national championships. Now, it only makes sense that there is going to be very little to dispute during the college football playoff era. Actually, I can tell you right now, I am not going to dispute anyone's championship. They were all won on the field against the best teams in the country. So I in no way dispute any of the national championships from 2014 through 22. However, there are concerns and questions about who made the 4-team field in 2014, in 2016, in 2017, in 2018, in 2019 to a certain extent, in 2020, in 21. I would say realistically only 2015 and 2022 were the only seasons where it's difficult to argue that other teams should have been placed in the field of 4. So while I'm not questioning the national championship winner because they won it on the field against 2 of the best teams in the country in the semifinal game and the championship game, I do question the 4 teams that were selected. It's an invitational, the 4 teams that were invited. Now, once we get to 2013 and go before that, okay, 98 through 2013 with the BCS, it becomes even cloudier and more questionable. Now, again, at least there's a championship game where you take 2 of the best teams in the country, not necessarily the 2 best or the 2 most deserving, but 2 of the best, 2 of the 3 best, 2 of the 5 best. And at least there was a game to determine something. So less valid than the playoff era, but more valid than the poll era. Then once we get into 1997 and before that, then it becomes rather questionable, disputed, and sometimes outright illogical, inaccurate, and faulty and flawed. And we will expose those seasons, and we will bring, and even my very focused attempt at objectivity is not going to be perfect. I'm not going to claim perfection because there are going to be seasons where it's like, yeah, there are a few seasons where there are going to be 5 national champions because there were not the proper games that were played on the field to narrow it down any more than that. Now, that's pretty rare. Usually there's going to be 1 or 2 national champions for each season, but there's going to be some, like 1977, I believe, is a year where there's like 5 schools that have a right. And I'm not going to play this game of, well, they both went 11-1. They didn't play each other, and they both beat 5 ranked teams, but I'm going to make a judgment. No, I'm going to say they're both national champions because there's no reasonable way to distinguish these two teams. Now, in terms of looking at the group of 5, the only time I will give any weight to a group of 5, or what we used to call what did we call them before there was Power 5 versus Group of 5? What was the distinction before that when it was the BCS teams and what did we call them then? I don't remember the terminology now. So David Portnoy is bringing up Washington, Miami, 1991. 91. I'm not going to make a distinction there. This is not me, although a lot of people want me to do this, decide who would have won the game. That's not what this is. This is basically saying Miami went 12-0 against a really good schedule. Washington went 12-0 over here against a really good schedule. They're both a national champion. Can't do anything about it. They didn't play. So for those of you who want me to decide Nebraska versus Michigan, that's a whole other thing. This is basically just going to say they're both the national champion in 1997. They are both the national champion. We can have another series where we try to match them up and we look at stats, we look at NFL player production and all of that, and we look at results on the field and the level of dominance and make some determination between those two teams and make a decision. That's a different exercise. This is simply saying objectively who should be the national champion. 1996, Florida was voted the national championship. Well, Florida went 11-1. Well, Ohio State went 11-1 as well, with just as difficult a schedule. Florida State also went 11-1. And looking back, for some reason, we treat these bowl games, and I loved the major bowl games back in the day when they really meant something, but we almost treat them like playoff games. They're not playoff games. They're just an additional game. They're not playoff games. So I don't give them any more weight than any other game with the magnitude of those type of teams playing, meaning that in 1996, Florida and Florida State both went 11-1 and they split. But Florida's given the national championship basically because of two reasons. Number one, their score was more decisive than Florida State's win. And number two, because it was in a bowl game. And we look at those as playoff games. They're not playoff games. It's just an additional game of two teams that are really good playing each other. The 1993 national championship is, to me, sorry, Florida State fans, you should not be the national champion when you went to Notre Dame and lost. And Notre Dame had the same record, and they won on the field. Yes, whoa, Nelly, I get your point. And that's why Florida won the national championship, because they lost to Florida State by 3, then won by 32 in a neutral site. I get it, but I'm talking about being objective. The objectivity is that they both went 11-1 and they split. Ralph is going the direction of Michigan against Nebraska because they played a better schedule. I think as the years have gone on, and certainly the vote in one of the polls, I don't remember which one, swayed Nebraska's favor after the bowl games. Remember, Michigan in 1997 was number one in both polls going into the bowl games. And Nebraska, based on their dominance against Tennessee and Michigan's close call against Washington State, flipped one of the polls. Most people look back, I think most college football fans that don't have a dog in the fight, look back on 1997 and think Nebraska was better. Nebraska finished better. They played a really, really strong a Big 12 championship game. I think they wiped out Texas A&M 54-15, and then they whipped Tennessee, who was really good, while Michigan struggled against Washington State. But if you look over the course of the entire season, you can make an argument that Michigan played a slightly better schedule, and they didn't have they did not need a miracle like Nebraska did. Nebraska, let's face it, they got completely lucky to beat Missouri. They had a miracle play. They had a ball get kicked up in the air and caught to keep them alive. Otherwise, they would have lost. All right, everyone, as you see, Wisconsin's number 16 in our program rankings. I would invite and encourage all of you to check out our program rankings. And again, this discussion will continue on. And again, just keep in mind, and I know that this gets confusing. So some people write me about what happened in 2003, and that has nothing to do with now. These are not all-time rankings, and these are not 2023 team rankings. They are program rankings. Okay. So appreciate you being here. The Voice of College Football. Next up, the Big Ten Live show is coming up at 6 Eastern right here. We will see you then.